So right now, moving on, I want to introduce Doug Farr. Doug is an American architect and urban planner and founder of Farr Associates Architecture and Urban Design Incorporated, a sustainable architecture and planning firm in Chicago, Illinois. Doug is the vice chair of the Board of Congress for the New Urbanism, a member of the LEED Steering Committee, and was the inaugural chair of the LEED for Neighborhood Development Committee. He is the founder of the 2030 Communities Campaign that seeks to reduce vehicle miles traveled. In 2007, he authored Sustainable Urbanism, and in the spring of 2018 released his latest book, Sustainable Nation. I believe it's available back there if you'd like to pick up a copy. Doug was born in Detroit, Michigan. Welcome, Doug.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
No.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm going to yodel. Okay, you heard me. Good morning. Who's a planner? Who's an elected official? Who's a developer? Engineer? Architect? New Englander? Citizen? Voter? Good. Good morning. Glad to be here. It's always hard to follow a charming Southerner, especially a developer with a project he's really proud of. But I'm going to do my best. So it's an honor to be here at Build Maine. I want to thank Kara and the organizers for inviting me. I'm going to take you on a journey. It is a journey into the future. It's a journey into the past, and I'm going to reframe the importance of our work. I'm also going to give you tools to make change faster. That's what I'm here to do. If you're into it, please stay and please be riveted. So here we go. So I'm an architect and planner. This is a timeline of our firm's work. Above the line are buildings we built. Below the lines are plans we prepared. We're a couple hundred buildings, a couple hundred plans after 28 years. So I'm in the business. Our buildings tend to be net zero. This is a net zero energy house in Chicago. It's fairly modern in temperament, but it aspires to net zero. Here's a place we've planned. It's called Uptown Normal. It's in a town of Normal, Illinois. And my joke is if your town is called Normal, you really have to try harder. You have to try harder. So, but this was a LEED ND development. I was chair of the LEED ND committee. But what's true about both of these projects that I'm showing you briefly is that they are lovable. They're highly sustainable and they're lovable. You want to be there. You are charmed by it. It tells a story. All of that. But in our practice, we think a lot about time. That is the right scale to change the world in the way we'd like, one building at a time or one place at a time. This is a chart, and I'm sure there's one available for Maine. This shows, let me make sure I got the right thing here. This shows, whoops, sorry. This shows the state of Illinois as our climate migrates to the south. And in the year 2100, the climate of Chicago will be the climate of East Texas, summer of East Texas. So that's actually already happening. So we're 2 climate zones south of where we were just a generation ago. So climate change is real. Here is a map published in the New York Times about a month ago of what Florida looks like in a couple of melt scenarios. This is the part of Florida that remains above water. So if you have Florida real estate, I recommend you swap it for stuff up here if you can do that at all. And it's both scary, it's a joke slide, but I think what I would say is our kids deserve a plan. Because we have brought forward a pretty high quality life in the United States. Not everybody, not equally, but I think we have to figure out and leave our kids with a plan forward on what we're supposed to do with the handoff we've given them. So that's really what the premise of Sustainable Nation is. So I start with, I'm going to take you up and take you down in the great kind of theater sense of you'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll be depressed, you'll be ecstatic. So this was one of those ecstatic moments. So this is a chart from the United Nations, which hopefully you're neutral on, that set goals back in 1990, the Millennium Development Goals. And in 1990, they established 16 topics they wanted to make progress on. This one was called Eradicate Extreme poverty and hunger. And in 1990, 47% of the world's population was experiencing those two things. 25 years later, it had gone down to 14%. So think of the history of humanity and how just basically dreary it all was. We were all poor, we were all hungry for the longest time. In one generation, we reduced it by a third. It's like 2.5 billion people in one generation were no longer poor and hungry. So we are making more progress than you'd ever believe if all you did was watch Fox News or CNN or MSNBC. I don't care what your flavor or stripe is. This is the best time ever to be a human being. This is a chart in the book, and it's on page, for those of you who have bought a book yesterday, or those of you who I hope will buy a book as a result of this talk. If you're following along, it's on page XV, Roman numeral XV. And this is a history of civilization in one page. What we figured out is all the things that we were interested in tracking aren't done in 2 years, or 5 years, or even 10. They all take generations. And so we started counting history and counting forward in 25-year generations. And we defined a first generation with the help of some historians back in Mesopotamia and Egypt in the year 3100, what's called the before the Common Era, BCE. So that's sort of zero, generation zero. The Egyptian pyramids, generation 24. Athens at its peak, 104. Rome at its peak, 122. Fast forward, Declaration of Independence, 198, and we're in 204 now. This chart has the effect of collapsing our history. And you can sort of appreciate the sort of human connections between, say, the Greeks and the Romans, 18 generations apart, about 400 years, kind of about the time Columbus left Europe, to the present day. And so you can kind of now imagine how generations pass on wisdom, how generations advance, how generations progress, or don't. So we also observed, here's our zero generation, and the beginning of civilization is defined by rule of law, written language, spoken language, government, infrastructure. So those are the things that make civilization, generation zero. It went up, the pace of change for all those generations was pretty slow until the Industrial Revolution in the 1850s. So that's generation 198. When we all know the pace of change picked up, places like this, industries really stepped up and provided our material comfort. With it, an information revolution started. So that was the sort of second gear, if you will, of the pace of change. The third gear of pace of change that we see is the beginning of the computing revolution, the information age. So, Steve Jobs and the Apple computer is as good a proxy as any for this idea that the world started getting flat. The internet connected us, we had data on how we were doing, imperfectly at first, better and better as we go on. But for the first time in the history of human civilization, we can measure how we're doing, not as an individual, but also as a species. And then the fourth generation, the fourth speed of change I like to cite is this one of understanding the human mind. So we think we're rational, we think we're the modern man and woman, but the work of people like Daniel Kahneman, who wrote this book, Thinking Fast and Slow, and for his career of work won the Nobel Peace Prize, is the guy that is my window, my kind of guide into understanding the inner workings of our mind. And this may seem far afield from your day job, but rest assured, I will hope to prove to you that mastering his insights are essential to you being effective at what you do, and frankly, to speeding up the impact you want to have. So those are the four sort of speeds of change. Now in the book we did some deep dive research on 3 trends related to the built environment. Since yesterday's talk, I've actually completely recooked this and reversed it. So the 3 we look at are CO2, obesity, and sprawl. And so I think you can hopefully appreciate their relationships to the built environment. I don't expect you to see or read or understand any of this other than to say that in the book there is this full change line appears as a 2-page spread. We looked at 3 trends that started at 0, peaked, and were hopefully going down to understand how quickly that happened and project them onto these 3. So that's the data, the research is in the book, it's really powerful, and I'm going to show you a few of them. So CO2. to compare CO2, no one's made a prediction to say when will the United States get carbon out of our economy. You can't find that answer. For good reason. People are freaked out about being wrong. Academics don't advance their career by publishing things that shortly thereafter is proven wrong or is based on faulty assumptions and so on. I have no such constraints. I don't care. I work for myself. I hope, you hire us or you like us or whatever, but basically I'm after the truth. I'm driven by curiosity. So we look at cigarette smoking. Cigarette smoking is a great data set because the cigarette rolling machine was just invented about 1890. So cigarettes didn't exist. So in 1900, 1% of Americans smoked. In 1963, 42% of adult Americans smoked, and it's now down to about 17% of adult Americans. And if all goes according to plan, around 2040-ish, we will be down, hopefully under 5% or so of Americans smoking. What I want you to pay attention to is the slope of this curve. So you can see to get from nothing to a peak is about that slope, and then to get from a peak to basically nothing is a little slower. So this is my science, is I'm visual, and I'm going to superimpose this graph over the carbon graph, and here's the generations I talked about. So here's our CO2 to date. Industrial revolution started. Our CO2 output in the United States peaked in 2005. Frankly, because we outsourced our industry to other countries. And so all the things you buy at Walmart or Target or wherever were produced in another country, and the carbon is accounted to them. So we actually have some fairly hard work to do. But if you follow the climate change dialogue and literature, what you see is the speed of change that we should be doing is a drastic drop like that. That's what the 2030 campaigns call for. The Paris Accords are slightly more generous. But is that going to happen? Is that possible? That's 12 years. So that's half a generation, half a human generation. Think about all those generations I showed you and how slow change was. We are in the generation that's alive that has been asked to change within our lifetime, within a generation, within a fraction of a generation. So how do we do that? But here's the kind of proof out that I want to show you. So this is the smoking line. Here's the CO2 line imposed over the top. And here's what it would look like if we decarbonized at the rate we quit smoking. It would be 2150 or 125 years too late. Are we having a great time this morning? Isn't this great? Like, wow, we had this fun Southern developer. He showed pictures of people at parties and spandex and everything. And what's with this guy? What's with this guy? What I'd like to pause and say, you may feel terrible, but what I hope will happen now, just happened and will happen over the next 4 or 5 minutes, is that we've replaced fear of the unknown, which is, ooh, how's that going? I don't really want to talk about it. I think it's going badly. I'd rather not talk about it, with, I think this is kind of our target, or maybe even our worst, I hope it's our worst case scenario. And we can now better it. So we've traded fear of the unknown for, I hope, frustration and anger at a projection. Okay? So you appreciate that? People don't work well working against fear, and particularly if it's undefined and there's no plan forward, all that kind of stuff. So hopefully that's happening. Second one I'm going to show you, and can I ask the folks in back, hey, way back, hey, can you keep it down back there, please? We're having a conversation up here, okay? So, yeah. So I shuffled the order in which I showed these today for the first time in a year and a half because I realized when we started this research, I thought that carbon and CO2 was absolutely the most important of these three things. And it may be. It's certainly the most urgent, particularly if you own real estate in Florida, right? But it's interesting, the carbon one of these three is going to be the quickest to solve itself. Quickest, faster than obesity. Let me show you what I'm talking about. And maybe even the least important. I'm going to be provocative. So here's a chart of global obesity. Here's the United States leading the pack. Top of it, so we're 37% of adult Americans, 38% are obese. Mexico's behind us, all the other countries. What's interesting about obesity as a global public health threat is it is yet to peak in any country. There's no country that's sort of gotten to its top, that like the chart on smoking in 1963, it peaked. Nothing's peaked anywhere in the world. It's still just going up. Here's the unique US version of this, which is how much we spend on healthcare. So gross domestic product, everyone knows, is kind of all the dollars in our economy. We spend about 18% of our GDP on healthcare, which is almost $1.05 in the United States goes to healthcare. So when you drive to a new town, you see the new medical complex and the new whatever. On one hand, I think of that as progress. Another way I think about it is just siphoning, taxing productive economy, right? If we could be healthy for less money, that's only a good thing. But we pay about 8% more in GDP than our nearest developed country, which I think is France here. So, and what's interesting, and just to say, my talk about obesity is not about individuals. This is not embarrassment. This is not shame. This is about policy, and you'll see why in a minute. This stat here, 21% of annual healthcare spending in the United States is related to obesity. If you do the math, 21% times 18% of GDP is about 3.5–4% of GDP in the United States is spent on treating obesity. 4% of GDP. So what's that like? That's the defense budget. It's all our planes and all our aircraft carriers, a standing army of 1 million soldiers, obesity. So that's why I say, is climate change the tragic crisis of our time or the urgent thing? Or is obesity one that we should be really paying attention to? Here's 3 projections that the book makes speculating on when the United States might peak in obesity. We are all but guaranteed for 50% of us to be obese in the year 2030. So we gain 1% per year in obesity, that's right there. So will we peak at 60% or 70% or 75%? There's no way really to know. But we spend 4% of GDP on obesity now. If it got to here, we'd spend maybe 8% of GDP on obesity. Isn't that crazy? This is everyday stuff. You think it's about individuals and it's about individual choices. It is a little bit, but it's part of a bigger system. This is on, for those of you following along in the book, page 128. So this is my kind of riff on capitalism. And so if you know, there's not politics here, these are just facts, but what industries knew and when they knew that. I see a parallel between smoking and sugar and carbon. And here's one way of looking at it. So what industry councils knew and when they knew it. So smokers could get hooked, known by the Tobacco Industry Council in 1954, almost 70 years ago. Carbohydrates, not fats, cause coronary heart disease, and with it, excessive weight gain and obesity. That was known by the Sugar Research Foundation in 1965, and that the earth can get cooked was known by ExxonMobil in 1982. So these are industry groups that were selling a bad product and knew it and kept doing it and keep doing it in all cases today. So in our work in the built environment, we are in some ways players in this big drama. And so there's a hugely local part of this. Hopefully this is making sense. And then the third one is sprawl. The change line that we compare sprawl to, interestingly enough, is what's called a Superfund site. People heard of Superfund sites, the super toxic things. They tend to be in the 19th century. If they were created in the 19th century, they're metal mines, silver, lead mines, and then industries and chemicals. But what's interesting about Superfund sites is they never go away. They're created, and when they are fixed, what that means is they're stabilized, so that they don't migrate. The bad chemicals in the water supply doesn't infect or harm nearby drinking supply. So they are permanent. And this is perfectly analogous to sprawl. Our friend and colleague Ellen Dunham-Jones, who has written the book literally in this one called Suburban Retrofit, keeps a collection of all the projects of sprawl that have been transformed into walkable places. 1,600 projects in a country of 320 million, of which she thinks 4 are cul-de-sac subdivisions that got undone. 4 in the country. So like Superfund sites, when we sprawl, it's permanent. The land subdivision is all but permanent. So what's the best thing you can do? Prevent it. Because we spend a lot, ounce of prevention, pound of cure. We are all cure and no prevention on this one. So anyway, I'll just show you this. Folks that were here yesterday saw this. This is the rate of population growth in the United States and its projected growth to the year 2100. We're adding about 40% more Americans by the end of the century. Here's the rate at which we consumed land in the 20th century. You can see it was kind of synchronous with population growth, and it spiked up, and then it kind of folded down. People are familiar with the Congress for New Urbanism. You've heard of it. So what I just added these kind of as illustrative points to say, this group, SIAM, kind of right about then published ideas and design manuals and manifestos that said, you know what, the sprawl and segregating land uses and relying on the car, that's the future, let's do it. And so we did it. And then CNU and other groups came along in the mid-90s and said, you know what, all that car stuff, you know, that is not the future, it's walking. Let's do something about it. So you can see the line bent. And with it is the power to avert more sprawl. So that saved about 5 million acres of land from development for human settlements. The book projects these three scenarios. Continuing sprawl at the current trend, as we add population, kind of a middling one, the hypo thing, and then my ideal is, why do we need to develop any more land for the next 130 million people? Because the neighborhoods we've created, 6 out of 7 American neighborhoods are automobile dependent. So if somehow all cars went away, you couldn't meet daily needs, right? So I would argue that some of these are automobile dependent because you can't get there from here, literally, but a number of them simply aren't dense enough. There's not enough sort of critical mass and purchasing power to support walk-to institutions. So I think this one's a particularly powerful one. It is in the third position after carbon and obesity because it is permanent. And so far as we know, irreversible, particularly in the land subdivision process. So hopefully we can talk about sprawl prevention. So here we go. Is this the right question to ask? Are we totally screwed? You can see there's screws to reinforce screwed, right? So I got to this part in my book, and my friend, this woman, Jeanette Sadiq Khan, who was Mike Bloomberg's transportation commissioner and wrote this incredible book, Street Fight, came to town, and I shared all of what I've just shared with you. Jeanette, oh my God, we've done this research, you can't believe how long change takes, and how this is harder to do than that, and oh my God. And she said this to me, Doug, stop writing your depressing book. It's a waste of your time and everyone's time. I was 2/3 the way through. It's like, well, thanks, Jeanette. Thanks a lot. She speaks her mind, by the way, especially with a glass of wine, just straight out truth serum. So, it was a little too late to call it back, right? Wendy, my wife, who is here today, and I thank her again for supporting me in all this, aren't you going to finish that thing sometime, right? So, but here's what was great about it, is that in getting kicked in the ass by Jeanette, I realized that I was staring at the power of what we'd come up with, which is, this is a still from, was it called? Ghost of Christmas Future. This is, Scrooge takes this Ghost of Christmas Future, that's Scrooge, and he takes him to see what the future looks like. And he sees Tiny Tim's rocking chair by the fire, and it's empty, and we're all so sad. But he goes back and mends his ways. So what I like to think that all of these charts are, is they don't mean anything. They're lines on a page. That isn't what's going to happen. I can assure you it will be different. But in seeing it projected out, I hope that we can see, boy, a little bit of difference now makes a huge difference 10 years or 50 or 200 years out. So we're at that point of maximum inflection in all three of these things. So when we were talking yesterday about Maine, I said, is Maine stopped sprawling? And somebody said, are you kidding me? Maine's sprawled through the whole thing. So I'd love to talk about how we can maybe slow that up. So what we've come up with, people have maybe heard of the term a theory of change. We've come up with a theory of fast change. So I now distinguish between, particularly in the not-for-profit realm, groups that are working to make change eventually. Like, we're working at it. Well, have you defined success? No, but we're working at it. We're good. We're good. It's like, well, you could be in business 1,000 years if you never define success and you never give yourself a deadline. So this is kind of the essence of our findings, is until you, and our thesis, which I want to just describe to you, is that The United States, the thesis of the book is the United States can be fully sustainable in 4 generations. How did I pick 4 generations? Did I prove it? No. This is the greatest time into the future that the human mind can envision. It is the length of a lifetime, a long-lived life, a child born today, 4 generations. This is my wife's mother, sister, nephew, his daughter, and her son. 5 generations in one picture. So from the point of view of that person to that person's life, that's the speed at which I project we should aim to change. If it takes 300 or 400 years, you can't be concerned with it. But you know, we all know the baby that's newborn or 1 or 2, in their lifetime, we can nail this. That's the premise. So it starts with something as nerdy as this. So if there are any architects in the room, you know what this is. This is a critical path schedule, why the foundations have to be poured before the structure can go up, and the envelope has to be finished before the flashing can go on, and windows come last, and blah, 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 right? This is how we run everything that gets done on schedule. Well, why would we leave all this other stuff to chance, to kind of intuition, to nice effort, attaboy, everyone gets a trophy? Why would we do that? So I'm saying we shouldn't. So in the book, our thesis is basically this. You take accelerants, of which there are 6. I'm going to talk about 2 or 3 today. There's no reason to be depressed because we've always sped things up. We know how to speed things up. We just often don't apply it. And I think there's a real opportunity to do that. Plus the 70 patterns that we've come up with in the book. And I'll talk about all of these things. And those 2 things combined get you to fast change. Here's a kind of simple example of what we're talking about. So theory of change, this is a walkable neighborhood step by step. We say start with where you are now. So this one says in this neighborhood 12% of trips are taken on foot. Well, what's the measure we want? We want to increase walking steps in the neighborhood. So our projection is in a generation, 25 years, we want 40% of trips to be taken on foot. And you backcast, and you forecast, and you fill in the middle. And these are typically informed by somebody somewhere that's already done it, or done half of it, or gives you some sense that that's a realistic jump to go from there to there. So it is defining success, putting it on, giving it a date when you want to achieve it, and then working back and forth to figure out how to do it. Here are the accelerants, and I'm going to talk to you about a couple of them. I will just say the accelerants that I will describe today have been used both for good and for evil. So I'm going to share with you, kind of like a Lord of the Rings moment, I'm going to share with you an immense power, and I'm going to ask you to use it only for good. I'm going to show you examples where that was not true. So the first one is called heuristics and framing. So have people heard the term heuristics? It is the work of Daniel Kahneman and others who brought this to my attention. A heuristic is a couple things. One is, it is the thing that we all do to substitute a question, a simpler question that we can answer for one that we don't have the answer to. So just a simple substitution. The one I like to say is, what's the circumference of a circle? Well, it's not pi times something because I can never quite remember pi. So I'll say it's 3 times something and then add a little bit. That's a classic heuristic, right? That one I can solve. It is also the quirks, the cognitive quirks in our mind, where we think we see things rationally, and none of us are rational, not remotely so. We've been convinced we are. I'm going to prove to you we are absolutely not. And if you don't understand this in your work, you're a chump. You're a chump. And I also think this stuff should be taught in grade schools, probably about age 6, so that kids can see their own kind of, begin to learn and observe their own quirks, so that they can be more in control of their lives. So this is a picture of presumably ancient humans, obviously it's a modern photograph, sitting around a campfire telling stories. And I think this is kind of the thing that we are most wired to do in terms of interpersonal communications, telling stories around the campfire. This is how all those generations passed on wisdom, in long-form poems that rhymed, so that you can remember 100 verses. And it took 20 people to remember verses 86 through 92, right? So, but the sticky, the memorable story, we're wired to like that and to attach to that. And so Blair did a great job, I think, of telling a bunch of stories about OKC and all of his stuff. But storytelling is really part and parcel of this. So these are a series of heuristics I'm going to take you through. And if I could ask someone to get me a cup of water, that would be just great. I think there's actually one sitting there. Doesn't matter who. first one is called the representativeness heuristic. Now this will come as no surprise to you that people assign to the people in their lives, the people near them, a heightened representativeness of the rest of the world. So you'll hear something like, well, everyone I talk to agrees with me on this, right? That's called representativeness heuristic. And you think that means, well, the country's with you, or the state of Maine's with you, or Lewiston's with you. No, it means you hang out with like-minded people and you listen to each other in your own echo chamber, right? And how in the world could we have ever arrived at that being a skill? I wonder, maybe it's sitting around a campfire and agreeing with all the people in your tribe about, you know, who the enemy is and what we're going to eat for lunch tomorrow and all this kind of stuff. So we assign a weird high proportion to the people around us. Thank you, brother. Thank you. Thanks. Second one. It's called loss aversion. So this is one that's incredibly powerful. We all do it. And if you've ever been to a public meeting, like a town hall meeting, this is what's going on. So, and the gist of it is the emotional power we experience from a loss is twice as powerful to us as a similar gain. So guess what? We're wired not to change. Now, why would that be a thing? My observation is if it was 10,000 years ago and you were alive to some age, whatever you did yesterday, you should probably do it again tomorrow because you're still alive, right? It was a survival thing. So you follow what your elders do. Don't change it up. Innovation was not rewarded in the old days. And our wiring and our chemistry and our endorphins and all of it experiences. So if you show up to a public meeting, you're a developer or a planner, say, gee, goodness, I've got a change here that I think will make the neighborhood better. Doesn't matter. It's change. That's loss. So even if it makes things better for people, they will be against it. And this is why. I thought for different times that drugs and the drinking water would just be a real quick fix here to kind of set it back, but I don't think that's the right thing to do. But I think that I'm going to show you a couple of techniques that maybe have sort of a similar effect. Escalation of commitment. This is another thing that we do all the time. Probably where you see this a lot is in the United States in our war strategies. So this would be Vietnam, this could be some of the Mideast wars recently. You're in it and you say, we can't quit now. You know, we've sacrificed so much, we've paid so much, we have so much in it, so much invested, we can't abandon it. Wow, that'd be embarrassing. We'd have to admit defeat. Best thing you can do is to admit defeat. So anyway, here's one I just love. This is called the anchoring heuristic. Our minds are so irrational that if I give you this math problem versus this math problem, there are predictable outcomes. So a typical room of people will, and these are, by the way, the answer to both of these, if you don't know it, are the same answer. So if you didn't know that, I just saved you that embarrassment. So, but it's called anchoring because the first number you see determines your guess. So this experiment's been repeated a bunch of times. They show it to a room full of people. Don't give them enough time to actually solve it. And don't give them a calculator and say, what do you think the number is? And so the average response to this one is 512. The average response to this one is 2,200. And what's the difference? The first number, 8, first number, 1. What's revealed here is how Americans suck at math, because the real answer is 40,000. But in terms of, you talk about, oh, we're rational. No, no, no. So you'll see this in negotiations. You start with a high number. Hey, I want to sell this house, but it's going to be $1 million. That's what it's going to be. It's worth 700,000, but you start high. And people anchor and say, gee, that house is worth a lot. Guy is asking $1 million. That's called anchoring. That's called anchoring. And then this one is so, could be used for good, could be used for evil. This is when you have 3 choices. There's a way, the ideal way is that they get better. You start with the kind of weakest one and better and better. If C is perceived as worse than B, it drives double the traffic back to B because there's a disappointment. People are hoping it builds to a crescendo. When you defy them, they are disappointed and they pick that. So if you wanted to trick people, put a bad C on and you'll sell B. So this ordering of things, this is, let's make a deal. Monty Monty Hall, I was going to say Monty Python. That's a different one. Monty Hall. This is all this. So anyway, all these rules are out there, and who commands them? None of us, but who does? People that do campaigns, people in advertising. So I'm going to take you through a couple campaigns. You can't quite see this, but this is the fictional character, a good friend of mine, Don Draper, from the TV show Mad Men. And I'd like to start with this quote. He's talking to one of his girlfriends or something, and he says, "What you call love was invented by a guy like me to sell you nylons." So the things that we take as precious and interpersonally important were planted in our minds. Pretty much all of them. All of them. I'm going to prove it to you. So the idea they say, oh, there's an American ethos, there's American culture here that's original. It was handed down from the Pilgrims. No, that didn't happen. So we've all been manipulated this whole time. So if you feel bad about social engineering or using any of these tactics, where we are now is not a natural construction. It's a result of a lot of this stuff. Consider this. The cigarette companies were able to sell millions of Americans, hundreds of millions of Americans, to smoke cigarettes, a known lethal and addictive product. But how'd they do it? Well, this man is his own man. He's got independence. This is the American spirit. Light one up, freedom. Freedom. They were somehow able to marry up cancer and freedom. They sold it to us. We all watched it happen, right? It's so interesting also, just all the kind of anti-smoking campaigns use all the same tactics. So it's really interesting. They can sell it to us, they can sell us away from it. This is the one I want to talk about because I think it's relevant to a lot of things we're talking about. In the 1950s and 60s, in the post-war era, the McDonald's and the Burger Kings and so on were coming online and wanted to sell food that you could carry in your car and then throw away the wrappings. So that wasn't a thing before that. We had just come out of the Depression, Second World War. Parsimony would fold and save, aluminum foil, paper clips. All of it was, rubber bands. We all remember our grandparents and parents that all did this. Like everything was not thrown away. So the industry needed to teach people to throw things away. And there's a great kind of citation in the book about this. So this is what they wanted to do, and then they had a problem. People learned how to throw away. They would just whip it out into in the roadside. So then the Ad Council, at the behest of the food folk, invented the Keep America Beautiful campaign to blame the waste on the litterer. So let's just be clear. We had a system where we didn't have waste. They wanted to sell us a product that required waste. And then they invented this campaign to blame us for it. And then this one, if you remember the crying Indian, those of you of a certain age, an Italian guy that poses an Indian, whatever, get involved in pollution. So, he's standing in front of, a smokestack and somebody throws trash in front of him. And again, it's shifting the responsibility from the system to the individual. And this is what I want to say about obesity, carbon, tobacco, all of it. So we are part of these bigger things. And then the last sort of couple closers here, our national mythology. The American dream, that was invented to sell subdivisions. The open road, that was invented to sell cars. These were not things. They were sold to us. Page 126, you can read about all that. And then I believe this slide that I showed yesterday is the unintended byproduct of all of that. Be your own man. Have your freedom. Get on your road. Live in a cul-de-sac. Don't know anybody. And this is America's Fears 2015, 30% of Americans fear dying. 58% fear talking to strangers. Let that sink in. This is death. That's final. And then this is apparently double death, is talking to a stranger. Where did that come from? We were sold that being by yourself and away from others is what Americans aspire to. And guess what? We bought it. We bought it. So when immigrants come to town, when there's a national debate on immigration, people different from us, we hate it. That did not happen naturally. That was trained to us. So I'm going to take you through, Kara's going to give me a 10-minute moment here, so I'll hopefully wrap this up. Professional ethics and liability. So When I look at a place like this, what I see are the 100 names of the professional design firms that created this mess. This is, blah, 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 civil engineers. This is blah, 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 architects, blah, blah, blah. All of them are state licensed professionals obligated to uphold the public health, safety, and welfare. Yet, when their work is all demonstrated and works all together, this is a national sacrifice zone. This is a disaster. This is the antithesis of health, safety, and welfare. How did the individual held to a standard somehow result in all of this? So I want to start a campaign which is just called Sign Your Work. So I want to, when I go to these places that are terrible, I want to see the design firm. Oh, okay, you did that one. Thank you. I'm going to call the state about you, right? So the current health, safety, and welfare for architects looks something like this. You should design buildings that don't collapse. Pretty good, right? And then you should design buildings that don't catch fire or kill people, through smoke or fire. These were issues that did not start in the 19th century or even the 18th century. In ancient Rome, these were your two criteria for being a good architect, right? So 2,000-year-old considerations, those are the only things we ask of architects today. So kind of whack. What's interesting is this one. And anyone working on street design and dealing with a fire marshal, I hope there are some fire marshals here today. I'd love to talk to you. Fire fatalities are tracked here in the United States, and smoking rate is tracked here. Guess what? Fewer people die from fire because fewer people are smoking in buildings and setting them on fire and causing the buildings to burn and kill people. So those of us, there are sprinklers here, and I think this is a building that deserves some sprinklers, so I'm okay with that. But the fire marshal is all powerful at driving this number down when maybe the whole time we just were smoking less. So the chest thumping, we're safer than ever before. Yeah, people quit smoking. And then there was the smoking ban on buildings indoors. That all happened right about here. So just saying, it's a little bit the 70s mantra, question authority, check your numbers, and all these charts are in the book, by the way. So the new health, safety, and welfare we're looking at is we flattened out building collapse and death by fire. This is death by cars. So if you're an architect or engineer that designs streets, safe ones or unsafe ones, here's the fatality rates of that, which is 13 times more than fire. So if you're ever dealing with a fire marshal and say, well, ma'am or sir, I'm a state licensed professional, as near as I can tell, I'm responsible for all of this. You're only responsible for this one. The thing I'm trying to make better in narrowing the streets is to reduce this number. Can you work with me on it? So I hope that makes sense. And then this one is inactive lifestyles. This is only 2 data points, 80,000, 240,000, but it's 30 times more lethal than fire on the low number and 80 times more lethal than fire. So it's a little crazy. In the book we have a chapter called The New Health, Safety, and Welfare, and we point out 2 things. Stroke prevention, this is too small for you to read, but basically climbing 20 flights of stairs per week reduced the risk of stroke and of death from all causes by 20%. Using stairs. But we've all seen buildings where the fire marshal got hold of it. The stair is in an enclosed shaft. You go in there, you expect to be assaulted. That is the result of the fire marshal's authority over a public health issue that is 30 to 80 times more lethal than the one they're fixing. So one of our patterns is to improve public health, have one open stair start in the lobby and run it up. You can have the other one enclosed, but give us one that's open. And I assure you the public health, safety, and welfare will go up, even though the fire marshal will fight you tooth and nail to do it. So these are these sort of cross interdisciplinary issues. So patterns. The subtitle of the book is Urban Design Patterns for the Future. Can you see what this is? It is a line. So we evolved on the savannah in East Africa. Our eyes were trained to look for patterns of movement. Does it match the pattern, or is it inconsistent with the pattern? And so we are wired for that. So we're in the book trying to exploit this. This book from the 70s mined history for design patterns. Many of us have it and have it dog-eared or post-it noted. But what we've done in the book is to assemble 70 patterns by experts of patterns that have been applied around the country and around the world that are future-minded. So patterns essentially for the future or from the future are what's in the back of the book. And they're organized into these 9 chapters. For time, I'm going to just give a couple quick ones. Collective effervescence. Back to that idea of 58% of people don't like talking to strangers. We say celebrate life with parties guided by the principles of Burning Man, which is a festival in the desert. Well, anyone who was here for the beer hall, whatever it's called, beer party last night, we're in the 1.0 experiment of trying to do this. So do you recognize this? So one of the principles of Burning Man is give gifts, be creative, and seek out strangers. So what happened last night? People were giving out gifts. So Vanessa Farr turned out to be riotously good at picking colors to match people's moods. So if you didn't get one, I think she would do, again, one for you today. And this was turning planning jargon into English, and there were a bunch of others. So it was this icebreaker, kind of get people talking. So I fantasize about doing this in our planning projects where everyone's angry and cranky and mad because you're there to change things, right? So I'm going to be brief about the empathetic planning. I told the story at yesterday's workshop that there's a power of testimonial. Someone from a town that gets up and speaks on for them personally and says, this would be better for me, or you were hurting me, and you like me. This is, ask the others. But here's how we apply this now in the work. So when we do an image preference survey, or we're showing images of what we want to do, we start by showing them this, the innovation adaptive lifestyle. The idea that there's innovators, early adopters, late adopters, laggards, right? So we just show people, look, you're all on a spectrum. Some of you are right there, and some of you are never there, right? And so we're teaching you about this stuff. So this is your propensity to like to change. And the way we do it is by illustrating, a new iPhone is released. Are you the guy that's still carrying that thing from the 70s? Or are you the guy that slept overnight to get the new iPhone, 13, whatever? And there's always people in the audience that are, oh, hey, Phil, he's talking about you. Yes, damage your phone over there, Phil, this kind of thing. And you can see, here's a real survey. First in line, 3%. Wait until the price drops, 33. Hang on to your flip phone, 34. So this is 2/3 of my audience have self-declared to be on the final third of the innovation chart. We can talk about that more. But then we do this. This is the empathetic part. Where did you first live after you left your parents' house? I never left. Rented with roommates, rented alone, bought a condo, bought a house. So it is from that person's point of view. Well, I guess I did start out renting with roommates. And then the second question we ask is, tell us about if you have children or will have children, where do you think they're going to start? Your fear is they're never going to leave, right? But they're probably going to rent with roommates. So only after you've asked those questions, and then a series of them related to this graphic, which is on page 262 of the book, you ask people, do you have any family or friends that hold any of these jobs? Food prep to management, these are organized by the percent of the economy that they represent. This is Austin, Texas data. So the bottom 6 represent 53% of the economy in Austin. It's what they earn a year, what they can save a year, what they can pay a month in housing, and what's available in the marketplace, nothing. Nothing. Right? So, and then we'll say, do you know anybody? And then should these people be allowed to live in your neighborhood? And that second question tends to track the first question. If you know someone that works food service, you're okay with them living in your neighborhood. But should housing or choices be provided by a generic third person or someone I don't know, people are against it. Their brain goes to their worst fear of the thing they don't want, the thing they maybe moved here to escape, right? So there's some race and class going on there. So how are we doing in time? We're done-ish. We got 5 minutes. Wow, the time here in Maine stretches. It's really nice. Patty's seen that before. So I'm going to take you through I thought this is the one that the patterns that I thought would be most relevant in your work. So this is a chapter called, what's it called? Vibrant Density, I believe it is, Vibrant Density. So back to this theme that, we're going to get 130 million more Americans. They should live in existing neighborhoods. They should make the neighborhoods we have better. If we can overcome our resistance to change and our fear of outsiders and our fear of strangers through all these devices, empathetic planning, parties based on Burning Man, all this kind of stuff, maybe we can get here. So this is related to form-based coding, it's related to incremental and infill development, and here we go. So this is a pattern created by our friends at Zimmerman Vogt, who are just the country's best market analysts when it comes to housing. And basically what they've said is attached housing. So I don't know if you know this, but Americans love detached single-family houses. Newsflash, they love attached single-family houses. But what Zimmerman Vogt's works did, I think it summarized 60 different studies, is that the only things getting built are attached housing, 100% in downtowns, 80% in in-town neighborhoods, and 45% attached housing, even in the TNDs. Even in the TNDs. So this is what people can afford. This is what the market is building new across the country. So if you say, oh, I'd love the food service guy to live in my neighborhood, but he's got to live in a single-family house, you trot out this chart and say, well, you know what? Actually, that's not a thing, because they can't afford the single-family. And this is what the rest of the country is demanding. Here's one, separate parking. And so here's some beautiful work. This is for higher density stuff done by John Ellis, and I'll just point out to you, these are dwelling units per acre, sort of 10 to 20, and then up to 150 to 200. And this is parking ratios, parking at 1 to 1, 0.5 to 1, 0.25 to 1. And the construction cost at a basis of 1 goes down as low as 75%. The price goes down as you reduce the cost of parking, and the densities go up. And so use this chart to say, well, if you want to make affordable housing, don't make us park a lot of cars. Right? And cars, as we know, are kind of in flux. Sorry about this, subtitle goes here. Design parking spaces to be adaptable in the future. So ramped parking, no future. What can you reuse that for? You can dynamite it, that's all. So we're saying, think of every parking structure or even parking plan you do as being a temporary use and plan it for its future going forward. Subtitles, persistent subtitles here. So, Missing Middle is the beautiful work of Dan Perolak, Opticos, and frankly many people now in the New Urbanism. Beautiful examples illustrated by students over on the side of the bungalow court and all of the missing middle housing types. Bungalow court, fourplex, side-by-side duplex, small multiplex. All of these are lovely and would achieve what we're talking about, that sort of density, that infill accommodate 130 million Americans. Persistent subtitle, excuse me, go back one. Here's one. Grant single-family homeowners the flexibility to add dwelling units on their lot. And I think your 9 o'clock speaker from Fayetteville talked about this, because she was talking about it at dinner last night. It was awesome. So, but you know, mortgage helper, caregiver, decanter, this is a really beautiful way to think about the evolution of a single-family house. The creation of markets for coach houses, and we studied Austin, Texas, Denver, Colorado, and Vancouver, BC. Vancouver's breakthrough was they created a market by standardizing the size and of the product. And then let's see, build incrementally. This is John Anderson's work. Become a developer, build incrementally all small buildings. I'm going to wrap up and just say, my closer is this. I think that there's an opportunity for all of us to prepare the ground for planning and prepare the ground in neighborhoods for change by doing something called National Neighborhood Days. And I know it's misspelled, but I've been told by people in my office if I misspell it, people under 20 start paying attention. So people under 30, excuse me. So, but this is patterned after the iconic American haircut, the mullet, which is business in the front, party in the back. This is planning in the spring, party in the fall. So for all of the things that there are national holidays for, neighborhoods are not one of them. Now, a lot of neighborhoods will get together and grill a slab of meat, stand around, and whatever. This is a little different. This is to say we're going to do a little bit of work. We're going to think about our future. We're maybe going to do a tactical thing. And then, of course, we're going to party. We want to meet all the folks. This is a very American thing. This is Alexis de Tocqueville, who saw our country in its early days in the 1830s, and he said we're a bunch of joiners. We'll get together and do projects. This was America. This is what built and settled the European version of what settled and built this country. And so the thesis of the book is this is our sweet spot right here. It's below all units of government, and it's above the scale of individuals. Small groups of people working in professional communities and neighborhoods across the country. This is the fabric of the United States. This is what built it in the first place, and this is an underused muscle right now. So the patterns we've provided are inducements. Just turn off your TV, go out and act, and the accelerants are for those of us who are really thinking about speeding up change. Those get applied together. So Reframe Change is a way to improve one's neighborhood, and it's modeled after National Parking Day. If you haven't heard of that, third Friday of September, you take over a parking space, you make it your living room, a putt-putt, state park, whatever. So in that same spirit of just do it. Don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness. And we're a nation of neighborhoods, and I thank you for this opportunity. Thank you. I was going to say one thing. If anybody is interested in being part of the 2019 pilot of National Neighborhood Days, which would be like a work event maybe sometime, we're thinking the two equinoxes, so the March 21st equinox and the September 21st equinox, are unclaimed real estate in our national calendar. So if you're interested in that, give me a business card, just write on the back, Neighborhoods Day or something like that. So, just walk them up to the front, hand them up to me. And we will follow up with an email to you that sort of give you some structure if you're interested in trying it, either in your neighborhood or in your town. Thanks. Thank you.
So we can do questions and conversations with our last two speakers at the beer garden, which is going to be out the front door, past the mural, and on your right. You really can't miss it. There's flags. So that's going to happen for the next hour and 15, hour and a half, and then we're going to convene back here at 1:45. Is that right? So the other thing to pay attention to when you do go outside is that there's a number of tactical urbanism installations, including one you're going to walk through in the street where typically cars are going through around 30, 40 miles an hour, and I think you will enjoy that. It's been slowed down a little bit, and just pay attention to how that was done. That was put in yesterday. Also check out, how the beer garden was actually put together. There's a lot of tips to be learned from just really observing what you see there. And then also there's some more installations if you go one block up and then walk toward the gigantic park in the middle of the city. So if you pop your phone open, it's super easy to kind of see where you can head to go to the center of the park to see some more installations that have happened there. So just, it's a gorgeous day. You can poke around and find some other things that are going on. Can you come up? Can you come up? Come up. Also, there's evaluations. We would love if you guys could fill those out before the end of the day and leave them with us. And then the other thing is, at the lunch, these two guys here want to talk about the side hustle house and how to get a demo of that built in time for Build Maine next year. So if anyone wants to talk about how to get that to happen, these guys, look at their faces. Striped shirt, purple shirt, jacket.
We'll be drinking beer.
They'll be at the beer garden. So find them there. We would love to see that happen. All right, so now we're going to do a little celebration exercise before we go. Just humor me. Who was here in 2014 for the first Build Maine? Stand up. Stand up. Okay, who was here for the second Build Maine in 2015? What about 2016? 2017? And this year. Woo! 5 years. Thanks to everybody for all your support over the years, and have a great lunch. And 1:45 back here. Taco truck is ready to sling some tacos. So